Hey guys, in this tutorial I'll be showing you how to set up a basic little leaning mechanic. So this is what it will kind of look like. When you run the game, you can press E to lean to the right, and when you lean, you can also shoot, and it will play the animations correctly. You can press Q to lean to the left. So, if you're up against a wall or something and you can't fire around the wall, if you lean, then you can, kind of look around and you can fire a little bit. All the variables that I'm using, I have as variables, like the lean amount and stuff like that, so you can kind of adjust it the way you want. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and we'll get right into it. So launch the Epic Game Launcher if you haven't already, and launch whatever version of Unreal you're using. I'm on 4.24.1, and select Games, and we want the first person template, and we want blueprints. We don't need any starter content, and we will call it Leaning Tutorial. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move this over here just so I can reference it. So there's a couple things we need to do before we actually get started. One of them I want to do real quick is just reduce the sound that it makes when you fire so it's not so loud because I hate that. So in the content folder under first person audio, I'm just going to change the volume on this to 0.1. And I also want to change the size of the projectile because you notice if you fire right now, it's like really huge. So it's kind of hard to test like shooting around corners because the stupid sphere collides with like everything. So if you go back to the content folder, it's in the first person blueprints, first person projectile. And we can really easily change the size of it. So on the sphere itself, just change the scale to like 0.02, 0.02, and 0.02. And for the collision component, set it to like 4. And also, I noticed that it's slightly off for whatever reason. So just come up, click on the sphere, and hit this little reset to set it all to zeros. All right, so now we got a nice little sphere, and we have it playing much quieter. So if you go ahead and run it, you can see I'm shooting a small sphere now. And the last thing I'm going to do is kind of get rid of all the VR stuff because if you open up the first-person character, you'll notice there's a bunch of VR stuff on the left, and I hate having that stuff when I'm working on tutorials, especially in this tutorial because we're going to be modifying the camera and like these arms, so it's going to get confusing if we have like extra sets of them. So for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm just going to delete them because I'm not doing anything with VR. And if you compile it, you're going to get a couple compiler errors, so we just need to remove the VR code real quick, which is pretty easy to do. So if you come back here to the event graph, we'll go up to the top because it's pretty easy at the top. So delete everything and the begin play except for the begin play node itself. And we don't need this thing over here, which is just resetting the VR. This section where it handles movement, we only want this pin, so delete this and hook that up. And same down below, we only want the get actor right vector, so delete that and that. And hook that up. And then one more little thing we have to fix is down here at the bottom. So this is just doing a switch statement on if we're using motion controllers, which we're not. So we always want to use the false value, which is coming from the left over here. So we can just delete all of this bottom stuff. And there we go. So just make sure we didn't break anything. If we go ahead and rerun this, we can walk around. Everything seems good. All right, so now we'll go ahead and start on the actual leaning mechanics. So the very first thing we should probably do is set up our animations. So the way it's going to work is when you lean left, it's going to blend into a lean left animation, and when you lean right, it's going to blend into a lean right animation. So in order to do that, we need animations for leaning left and leaning right. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you would create animations for those if you didn't have an animator. Like ideally you would get them from an animator, but if you don't, then you're going to have to create them yourself like I did. But I'm going to provide you guys with the ones that I created just so you don't have to manually go in there and like rotate all the bones like I did and try to get it looking correct. If you want to do that, by all means, go ahead and do it for yourself, and I'll show you exactly how to do that here in a second. But I'm just going to show you how to do it, and then I'm going to just import the ones that I already created because I already spent a long, not a long time, but I already spent a good amount of time tweaking the bones and the rotations to get them correct. So like I said, this is the process that I did. You don't have to follow along if you're just going to copy the files that I provide for you. And by the way, they're in the description of this video. Just go ahead and download them and copy them into your project. But I'll show you what I did to create those files, just in case you want to know. So come into the first person blueprint folder, or sorry, the first person folder. And in animations, we want to open up the first person idle animation, which is just him idling like this. And we are going to create the animation files based off of this animation. And like I said, you don't have to do this if you're just downloading the ones that I provided to you. But if you want to try to do it yourself, by all means, go ahead. I probably wouldn't recommend it if you're just following along with this tutorial, but maybe later, if you want to tweak them, you can. So basically what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to pause it and go back to frame 0. And up here at the top, you want to click on create asset and then create animation. And then, okay, no, wait, actually, no, not yet. I almost forgot. So this is the animation pose of him idling. So we want to modify it to have it leaning to the left a little bit, and then we're going to create an animation based off that. So if you come up here to character at the top and go down to bones and select all hierarchy, it will show you like all the bones in the hierarchy, even the ones that aren't even the ones that don't have meshes associated with them. So more or less what you want to do is you want to create a left animation and a right animation, and you're actually going to need a middle animation. So the middle animation is really easy. Just come up here to create animation, because this is the middle animation. Like when he's not leaning left or right, we want this to be his pose. So create asset, create animation, and we want to do it from the current pose. I'm just going to send it to the content directory so it's easy, and we'll call this no lean. Okay, so now we have that one. We want to create one for the left and the right. So basically all you really want to do is like select the spine, for example, like spine 01, and then kind of, drag it to the right, however much you think is right. And you come up here and you say create animation from the current pose into the content directory, and we'll say lean right. Press OK. And then we need one for left, so kind of lean them left a little bit, and say create animation from the current pose and lean left and the content directory. So that's like the general gist of it. Now it's a little bit more difficult than that, because if you were to use these animations the way we just created them here, it wouldn't quite look right, because you kind of also are like when he leans left, like you have to, this arm wants to be like this, and this arm wants to be like rotated. Like there's just more things you want to do, and you can figure that out by just like trial and error. And that's why I said it's good to have an animator do this, because they'd be able to do it much better in like Maya or Blender or something. But yeah, so I'm not going to use those ones I just created. If you go back to the content directory, you see they're right here. But that's all I did. I just did that, except I spent a lot more time like making sure like I rotated everything in like a really nice way so it looks good in the end. So I'm just going to go ahead and import the ones I created. So I'm going to delete these, but that's how you do it. I'm going to delete these, and then on my desktop, I just have these right here. And again, they're going to be in the description of this video. So download them and then just drag them in. Or you can't do that. I forgot. You have to hit import. And from the desktop, anims. Or you can't do that either. How do you do this? I think you save everything. I think you have to restart Unreal. So just close Unreal and copy them and go to your project, wherever it is. Mine is in Unreal. What do we call this? Leaning tutorial, yeah. And content, first person animations. We'll just drop them right here. And then once they're in the content folder, wherever you want them, come back and launch the project. So now just to make sure they're there, go to first person animations. So here we go. So we have our lean left, lean right, and no lean animations. So again, these are the ones that I created before I made the tutorial, and the ones that are in the description. So once you have these animations, regardless of how you got them, you want to create a blend space from this. So if you right click and go to animations, we want a or I guess it's called aim offset. We want an aim offset 1D, standing for one dimension. So click on that, and then it's going to want to know the skeleton that it's going to use. And we want the SK mannequin arms skeleton, since that's what we're working with. And we will just call this lean aim offset, I guess. So go ahead and open this up. And this is where we're going to make use of our 3 animations. So you can see on the right here, we have our 3 animations that we made. If you try to drag them in now, ooh, why did that even work? Oh, because I already set them up the correct way. I was really confused for a second. So if you made them yourself, or you got them from an animator, you're going to have to open each one of them up. So double click on each one. And over here on the left, by default, they'll be set to no additive like this. You want to make sure you have mesh space and selected animation frame selected. And then for the animation, you want to make sure you select the first person idle. And you need to do that for all 3 of those. If you don't have that set, like, let me just remove it so to show you. So if I don't have it set for lean left, and you come in here and you try to add lean left to this, it will show as like a little red key, and it won't let you add it. And that's because it needs to be set to this mesh space additive, selected animation frames, and it needs to be set to first person idle. So back in here, again, we'll add our lean left, or actually don't do that quite yet. We want to adjust the scale. So the horizontal axis, this is basically our lean alpha. And for the minimum axis value, we're going to want -1. For the maximum alpha value, we're going to want 1. We only want 2 grid divisions. And the interpolation time, we'll just leave that for 0 for right now. So drag and lean left over here, and lean right on the right, and no lean in the middle. Now, if you did this correctly, oh, there's no little, if the little green thing isn't showing up, just close it and reopen it. So here's this little green ball that lets us kind of represent, you know, what the current value of alpha is. So if when alpha is -1, then he's going to be leaning to the left. And when it's 1, he's going to be leaning to the right. And when it's 0, he's just going to not be leaning at all. So this is basically the leaning animation that we want to use for our character whenever the keys are pressed. And we need to hook this up so that it plays as part of his animation graph. So now that we have this, let's go to his animation graph. So if you go back to the same folder that we created all this stuff in, this orange one over here, the first person anim blueprint, if you double click on that, we want to go to the anim graph. And in the anim graph, and by the way, the anim graph is also over here on the left if you can't find it. You can just double click on it. So the anim graph, basically all it's doing is it's doing the state machine stuff, which handles all the walking, and then it's slotting in the arms animation montage, which is used for shooting and probably jumping and stuff like that. I don't know. But we want to do our stuff in here as well. And it's important that we put it right after this is done, because we want the leaning to, like, say you shoot your gun, we want the shooting animation to be played while he's leaning. And to do that, the stuff we need to put needs to go right here between after you do the slots of the arms and before the actual output. So to blend in this aim space we made, there's a certain node for that called blend, or no, we just typed the name of the offset. Yeah, that's right. So just type in aim offset, and then your lean aim offset should pop up. Like, just type in aim offset, and your aim offset should pop up, and click on that. So this is basically this. So this is our lean alpha, which again is just the name that we put right here. This represents, what value we're using currently on this graph. So we need to fill this out to something. So right now I'm just going to say right click and promote to variable, and this will be our lean alpha. And we'll need to set that here and in a bit. And to hook it up, you just drag like and like this, and like that. Now, by default, since lean alpha, the default value for lean alpha, since we just made it, is going to be 0 here. It's just going to blend. It's going to blend in the no lean animation with the current idle animation, so you really should get no change if you run it. So if you guys think you run it now, like I said, there's no change. But it is blending in this animation, but the value we passed in is 0. If you want to test that it's working, like you can set lean alpha to a default value of 1, and you'll see even here on the right, the guy will kind of lean. And if you play it, then you'll see your guy is doing the lean right animation. So with that being said, we can set it back to 0 because we definitely want it to be 0 by default. So like I said, we need to set this value to something, and we can do that in the event graph. So one thing that I like to do in the event graphs, you don't have to do this, but it kind of makes life easier. Because you notice in order to get access to the player, you have to say like try get pawn owner, and if you want to get a specific variable from the player, then you have to cast this to your player class, and it kind of gets old if you have to do it all over the place. So what I like to do is there's an event called event blueprint initialize animation that I believe only gets called once at the very beginning. And so from here, we're just going to get the player and we're going to save a copy of him so that we can reference him later. So just copy this try get pawn owner node. Why can't I copy this? Okay, apparently I just can't copy that. Try get pawn owner. And we want to cast to our first person character. And we want to promote this to a variable. So right click. What is happening? Why can't I like do anything normally? Something weird is happening. Okay, there we go. I don't know why I had to run and stop it. So right click on this little blue part here and say promote to variable. And this is just going to be our player. So now we can, very easily access this player down here. So after all this wonderful nonsense that Unreal has added for us, we want to find our lean alpha. So to do that, we're going to get our player, and we need to make a function inside of the player for getting his current lean alpha. So I'm just going to make a little to-do here that says get lean alpha value from the player. So we need to do that like right here, but we can't do it yet because there's no function for that. So we will hook that up next. So go back to your content folder, and in first person blueprints, first person character. Inside here, we need to make quite a few things. All right, so I'm just going to start out and create all the variables that we need. And then once we have all the variables and all the functions that we need, we'll go ahead and we'll fill them out later. So we're going to create 4 variables here. The first one we want to create is called lean speed. And this is going to be like a constant variable that we're only going to set at the beginning. It's just like a convenience thing. So since it's going to be a constant variable, we want to select that it's blueprint read only up here. We also want to make sure it's private. And I'm going to add it. I like to add things that are constant to a category called constants, just so it's easy at a glance to know which variables are supposed to be changed, like in the editor, and which variables are actually variables. So this is our lean speed. We want another constant, so go ahead and duplicate this, and we'll call it camera lean offset y. So this is this is how much the camera will move or offset whenever you lean on the y-axis. Okay, and then we want 2 other variables, one for the lean alpha, and this should be private, and I'm just going to add it to a leaning category. And we want another one in the leaning category, and this is going to be our initial camera lean offset y. I know that sounds like a long name, but better to be descriptive. And so this is basically like the camera's initial offset, because we want to maintain that if the player goes from leaning to not leaning, we want to go back to the initial lean offset. And again, this will make more sense once we actually start implementing it. All right, so after that, there are a few functions we want to create. So come up here and click on functions. And the first one we want to create is called handle tick. And it's going to take in a float called delta seconds. And this is basically just our tick function, but I just like to make functions for it so it's not super crowded on the event graph. And I like to add private functions to a private category. Again, just something I like to do. And make sure you set it to private. And then we're going to create 3 more private functions that are going to end up helping us out later. So duplicate this and call it modify lean degrees. And this function is going to take in an amount, which is a float. And we want one for resetting the lean, so that it goes back to no leaning whenever you let go of the keys. So we'll say reset lean. And this is also private. Ooh, make sure you set these to private. Yeah. And we want one more for offset camera, which will just move the camera whenever you lean. And then we want one public function. So come over here and make a new one so that's public and say get current lean degrees. And make sure it's set to public over here on the right. For this one, it can be pure and constant because all it is just getting something. And we can actually just do this function right now. This is just going to get the lean alpha. Oh, this shouldn't be degrees. Sorry, this should be alpha. And this should be alpha too. Sorry, I renamed it in my other project and I forgot to rename it. So just to recap, we got 4 private functions that we're going to fill out later, and 1 public fund for getting the current lean alpha. So one thing we can do real quick is go back to the first person animation blueprint, and we have a little to do here for getting the lean alpha. Now we can actually do that since we have that function, so get lean alpha. And we will set the lean alpha that we created to that one, like so. So at this point, I'll probably go on to part 2 of the video and end this one, just so it doesn't get too long. So I'll see you in the next video.